Hello, welcome again to FAIRtax Power Radio. I'm Bob Paxton.
And I'm Bob Scarborough.
And we are the FAIRtax
FAIRtax
Guys.
Guys.
Yeah, scrolling banner and cubed. Oh, that almost matches the shirt there, doesn't it?
You can
That's
yes,
close.
it's just like you are transposing into the giant Rubik's Cube from wherever,
Yes.
from the
Well,
Internal Revenue Service.
the Internal
Fill in the
Revenue
blank
Service.
for the
I wish we could. Yeah, what I have to say about the Internal Revenue Service would have to be blanked out on a family
That's
show.
right.
So
It'd be like, but having one of these, and I'll mention this, the FAIRtax banner is something you need to have at least 2 or 3 of them, because if you go to enough town hall meetings or enough press conferences for candidates, you could very easily wear this out. It's very well made. It's an interesting design. But
Yeah.
you
But
can
just
just
by
walk in,
the very nature of it, it's not going to last forever. So you can. I've
we
got
hope
several
that
of them.
at some point in time, all of this can be retired,
Mhm.
and we can go ahead and say the fair tax is the collection method for the federal government. And I can't imagine that you couldn't call up the president of the United States right now and say to him, and of course we're nonpartisan. The fair tax is nonpartisan.
Oh, keep digging.
We could say, yeah, thank you very much. I'm getting a little bit, I'm not going to lower my chair to pretend like I'm falling into the hole. But think about it for a moment. There's a lot going on in the administration right now. They could use some help. I think we can all agree on that. I mean, I think Republicans, Democrats, Libertarians, everybody could agree there's some dysfunction junction up there in the White House.
Yeah, I'm going to let that sit. That is a big fat hanging curveball, but I'm going to let it go.
No, there's no need to reply. I'm just hoping that all of our friends out there will take it upon themselves to let their friends in the other party know that, hey, this is not a bad idea when you get right down to it, because we're not talking about what the money gets spent on. We're only talking about how it gets collected.
That is correct. Well, I tell you, I don't know about up there in North Carolina, but some of the weatherman down here has flipped the switch. It is summer. We're getting, 90 some degrees in the afternoon. It won't be long for the famous Florida thunderstorms follow.
Well, we're in the middle of a rain shower now, and it's supposed to be raining all week. I worked all weekend to get the lawn right. We go for lawn of the month every month. We've actually made the yard sign up ourselves in case we don't win, that we can plop the yard sign in that says yard of the month. I'm just kidding, but we did a considerable amount of work yesterday, and it was wonderful because we got some plants out, we got the maters out, we got the cucumbers out, we got the onions out, we got the jalapenos out, and now it's raining like crazy. So it was perfect timing.
Save some of that for October when me and Jade come up there to do our FAIRtax Power Radio live from WTOB one Sunday morning. First Sunday in October, I think we've got that scheduled.
Correct. That's correct. That's right around the fair time too, right around the Carolina.
Yeah, that's a ways away. So you guys want to mark your calendars for that. Let's see. Before too much more time gets away from us, are we ready?
Yes, sir. It's time for Congress.gov.
Can I dig it?
We have an opening for that. We need to come up with a pre-recorded opening for that.
Okay. Well, I found one that is going into the Hall of Shame that we'll be reviewing at the end of the year.
Nice.
This is absolutely insane. HR 7849 to amend the Internal Revenue Code of 1986 to allow a credit against tax for the purchase of, get this, certain adaptive gear required to prevent the entanglement of right whales. I kid you not. That is a proposal that they want to put in the tax code.
Right whales.
Right whales. Yeah.
And I know some.
Yeah, don't worry about the humpback whales. Don't worry about the blue whales. Don't worry about anything else. This is to prevent the entanglement of right whales. So if you spend money on equipment to prevent the entanglement of right whales, let's see who sponsors this. This is Seth Moulton from Massachusetts District 6. Wants to give you a tax credit for the purchase of certain adaptive gear to prevent the entanglement of right whales. Now, does that one belong in the Hall of Shame, or does it?
It does, and for other purposes.
Did that say for other purposes?
I know. I'm probably sure it didn't. I can't imagine that they would need to have entanglement gear
That one didn't, but I got a couple others that do.
for other
Let's-
purposes.
Yes, here we go. This is HR 7844 to amend the Internal Revenue Code to improve tax filing efforts in rural areas and for other purposes. Well,
There you go.
if you want to improve tax filing, get rid of tax filing by replacing the income tax with a fair tax. There
That's
we go.
right.
That's an easy one.
Yeah.
I will hit that curveball out of the park.
Yes, sir.
But that's it. Scooting right along here, HR 7831 to amend the Internal Revenue Code to provide a deduction for certain charity care furnished by physicians and for other purposes. So I guess if you're a doctor and you treat charity cases, this
Yeah.
is my guy, Daniel Webster. I live in his district here in
Is
Florida.
that like pro bono work for an attorney? If you're a doctor, it's just called charity care. They don't have a
I guess
Latin
so I go for my annual checkup this afternoon, so I'll see if I can ask him about that.
Yeah.
But, Daniel Webster here wants to provide a deduction for certain charity care furnished by physicians and for other purposes. How's that?
merciful heaven, certain. So you have to fit into the proper category before the charity care can be utilized in your particular situation.
And again, there is no text in these. All four of these that we've looked at do not have text in them. It takes a while for the actual text of the bills to be published in congress.gov. And so sometimes all you have to do is all you have to go on is that little description.
Yeah.
And there's one more, HR 7823 to amend the Internal Revenue Code to make the health coverage tax credit permanent. We've talked about the built on sand nature of the tax code. It's this one day that it changes, then they give you something, then they take it back, then they make it temporary, then they make it permanent. And so that's just another one that illustrates how insanely, unstable the current income tax code is and why we need to yank it out by the roots and replace it with a fair tax.
Do you think anybody would ever go back to a bill that they introduced into the tax code and add in or modify based on for other purposes?
Oh, I'm sure they do.
Because
I don't know exactly.
We have a place where
that
one. Yeah, we have the one about 5 years ago that we had. We could add in for other because everything is for other purposes. But I mean, who qualifies it as for other purposes is something that you can do. And again, we're here to underscore the lunacy of the tax code altogether, and it's all of the people that have to work on these particular items and getting them, if they were ever passed by Congress and signed into law, that they would actually make it into the tax code.
Yeah, well, my old man's memory is probably not going to remember this, and I never see Daniel Webster. I have never seen him face to face. But the next time I see Kat Kamek, who represents the next district over, and is a big fair tax supporter and a fair tax co-sponsor, thank you.
Yes,
I'll see if I can ask her what this for other purposes is and how that works. It'll be a while before that happens.
There just in case they forgot something, maybe, or just in such a rush to get the wording in that they by the way, we forgot back about 2 weeks ago that we needed to add whatever for other purposes is into the bill.
Well, this was a productive Congress.gov segment. We found one that goes into the Hall of Shame. Again, for those who are new to the program, we keep track of some of the craziest tax proposals all through the year. And at the end of the year, we go through what we call the Hall of Shame. And this one is definitely going to be the one about the preventing entanglement of right whales as part of the tax code. I mean, I guarantee there's no other country anywhere in the world that has anything like that in their tax.
Well, the tax code in and of itself is an entanglement. Wouldn't you agree, Mr. Paxton?
I would definitely say that's why we need to get rid of it and replace it with a fair tax. But we need to move on here.
Yes,
I say we have been beating on the IRS for quite a while, and of course they deserve it. And we will indeed go back to beating on the IRS for too much longer. But we wanted to do something that most of the people, I would just say 99.874% of the people who watch Fair Tax Power Radio on a regular basis already have some degree of familiarity with the fair tax. But there are people out there that still have no clue, don't even know that it exists. They don't even know what the fair tax is. And so if any of those folks are watching, and actually, I'd like to give the people who actually know about the fair tax,
Yes.
we want to give a resource that they could use to show their friends who don't know about the fair tax, how it works and some of the key features about it. And the best way to do that, if you go to fairtax.org, there's an FAQ section there. And so we're just going to go through that. And of course, all of this information that we're giving you is coming straight out of the FAQ. And so if you want to know, well, what did he say? Just go back and look at it. And
because a lot of folks, you say fair tax and they think, well, flat tax, well, fair, we don't know. And the words get interchanged. It's a tax on consumption. Mm-hmm. And then once they go, oh, okay. And then you say something like, well, your method of paying your tax changes in this way. And a lot of folks immediately go to, for whatever reason, they go to, well, how about low income families, retirees on fixed incomes? How does this help out? Is it going to affect my Social Security check and that kind of thing?
All right. Well, that's exactly the kind of questions that we're going to dig into here by going through the fairtax.org FAQ. We can finish this program and we can probably do next week's program on it too. This is a very extensive FAQ. So if you need an education on what the fair tax is, how it works, how it affects things, just go through and read it. And the very first question they ask in this FAQ is one that you get all the time. How does the fair tax protect low-income families and individuals? And how does it protect retirees on fixed incomes? They've got several paragraphs here. I can give you the Reader's Digest answer to that, and that would be the prebate.
Right, exactly. The money, it's actually an advance, a refund of the taxes that you are going to pay that month up to the poverty level. And it's calculated out every year based on calculations that the Social Security Administration puts out that says, here's the amount of money that would be considered poverty level income. And then you say, I've got 2 people in my family, I've got 3, I've got 4, I've got 1. And based on that number, that is the amount of money that you will get back every month ahead of, and that's why it's called the prebate, ahead of the spending up to the poverty level. And I think
which varies, as you mentioned, it varies by household size.
Right.
It's calculated once a year, and every year they come up with new figures on how much the prebate would be. And again, that's if they're going to figure that if you're just making poverty level income, you're going to spend just about everything you've got providing your family with basic necessities, food, clothing, transportation, stuff like that, the electric bill. And so all of those things that are your basic necessities that you spend your money on first, the tax you pay on those necessities when you buy them at the cash register is refunded to you by this prebate. So the net effect is you take nothing out of your pocket to feed the federal government until you have taken care of your family's basic necessities. This is one of our sizzle points. If you think you like feeding your family before feeding the government, you might be a fair tax fan.
That's right. And those spending at twice the poverty level pay a tax of only 11.5%, which is much, much lower than the income and the payroll tax burden that is borne on employees today. That payroll tax is murder on a lot of people. And it gets out of your check like that, and you don't even see it. You live off of, whatever you get at the bottom line at the net amount. And I've always said, well, hey, you want to start a revolution in tax reform, start allowing, instead of having it the burden of the employer, have it the burden of the employee to pay their taxes on a monthly basis. It'll be over in 2 minutes. After Friday at 2:00, you get your check, you go, holy cow, what, I got to pay this?
Okay. Well, I got another question for you. Is it fair for rich people to get the exact same fair tax prebate as poor people?
Yeah. $10 million.
Explain that, sir. How is it fair to give to rich people the exact same prebate? How come the poor people don't get bigger ones?
Okay. A billionaire under the fair tax. Of course,
Yes.
There's only a few of them. If that billionaire spends $10 million, he pays a tax of 2.3 million and gets a prebate of $4,697, assuming he's married and has no children. His effective tax rate as a percent of spending is 22.95, almost 23%. Now let's look at a middle income married couple with no children under the fair tax. If they spend 50 grand and they pay $6,800 net of their prebate for an effective tax rate of 13.6%, the effective tax rate increases as spending increases, but never exceeds 23%, which is the balancing act. And correct me if I'm wrong, but there's a method of introducing new methods of taxation that says, well, you can't upset the apple cart. You have to net out. You have to basically collect the same amount of money as you would under the current income tax.
And that's one of the design parameters of the fair tax, that it be revenue neutral, that it creates as much revenue for the government as the income tax currently does. It does not address how that money is spent, and it does not address the fact that the government spends more than they collect. That's
right.
Going to happen.
This is amazing. Even now, in the midst of all the inflation that's going on. Now, I wanted to underscore this because this is where a lot of people sort of put the brakes on their understanding of the fair tax. A low income couple that spends at the poverty level under the fair tax, they will pay no net fair tax at all. Under the income tax system today, they not only pay 15% in payroll taxes, which they don't see in their check, it's already taken out. They get it as a refund, possibly at the April 15th filing. They also pay hidden taxes. And those hidden taxes, of course, are in the goods that they buy, the products that they get, the services that they contract for, that come from corporate taxes, private sector compliance costs, payroll taxes passed on to consumers and embedded in the price of everything they buy, because we know corporations don't pay taxes. They basically, they get hit with a tax. It ends up coming back to us. We, the consumer, pay that. So low income families will get the prebate and more than likely will cover all of what they would consider essential items in their purchasing. And the government doesn't tell you, the fair tax doesn't say, well, milk is an essential item or bread or eggs.
You decide what your essentials are by what you spend your money on first. And for someone who spends less than the poverty level, their tax rate is actually negative. They'll receive back more in prebate than they pay in fair tax at the cash register. But I want you to back up to that middle income married couple a bit, or you mentioned earlier, that under the fair tax, they would pay a tax rate of 13.6%. What would their tax liability look like under the income tax?
Well, if the same couple earned $50,000 in wages under the current tax system, they'd pay a little over $4,000 in income tax, $3,800 in payroll taxes, for a total of almost $7,900, which is almost 15.8%, a tax burden 14.1% higher than under the fair tax. And their employer will pay, get this, for that person, another $3,825 in payroll taxes. Most economists are going to agree that the employer payroll tax is actually borne by employees in the form of lower wages. In other words, you're not getting paid what you may be worth. Think about it for a minute. If your boss were basically operating his business under the fair tax, he would have all of the compliance costs washed out in terms of how to keep up with tax, paying tax and payroll and things that he would buy and raw materials and all that. The employer payroll tax is actually borne by you in the form of lower wages. The couple is paying $11,743, which is 23.5% in taxes today, which doesn't even include the hidden taxes they pay every time they make a purchase, because as you know, it costs money to make the scrolling banner, along with computer mice, cell phones, everything that you have that you use. Their taxes embedding. And think about it for a minute. If all the corporations that make all of that stuff have the taxes that bring that product to market taken out, then that will keep the costs low on the item, and you'll end up spending less. Much more competitive situation there. And certainly in terms of mental anguish and stress, come April 15th, everybody's going to be breathing a lot easier.
Yeah, we got a little about 7.5 minutes left. I want to get to this one. What about senior citizens and retired people? That's a big one for here in Florida where I live. Now, as a group, seniors, they will do really well under the fair tax. Low income seniors especially are much better off than they would be under the income tax system. Now, a lot of people erroneously believe that us old folks live exclusively on Social Security, that those people who live exclusively on Social Security pay no taxes. Well, that ain't so. I know I get taxes taken out of my Social Security, and as you mentioned it earlier, they are paying the hidden corporate income taxes and employer payroll taxes whenever they buy anything. So with a fair tax, you just pay 23 cents out of every dollar you spend. But with the income tax, that's just insidious how those embedded taxes work. The cost of the corporate taxes, the cost of the corporate compliance costs, all of that is passed on to consumers in the prices they pay, and we never see it. Of course, seniors are going to get the prebate just like everybody else. They will, have their necessities tax-free, and that works pretty cool. Now, I got this question earlier. I did a fair tax presentation to a group of retired federal employees earlier in the week, and this question popped up. Are seniors taxed twice on savings? Once when they saved it, and now again when they spend it. You get it all the time about this double taxation. Clear that one up for everyone, if you would, please, sir.
Well, the challenges that we face are more in a misunderstanding of that whole process. Fair tax is, of course, as we've said, revenue neutral. No more money coming into the coffers of the federal government than the current system allows, income tax. The fair tax on consumption, only changes where the money is raised, not the amount. Additionally, some people feel that because they've heard it on the news in a quick 30-second soundbite. Some people believe they have invested in a Roth IRA will never pay taxes on this money. They may not know it, but they are paying corporate income taxes, payroll taxes, plus the associated compliance costs that are hidden in the price of every retail purchase that they make. And under the fair tax, those hidden taxes are driven out of retail prices. Competition will keep that cost going down. Believe me, the manufacturer is not going to keep that dollar amount that is represented for the taxes. The fair tax will drive those taxes out of retail prices, the cost of making the item, the taxes on the cost. They can determine the amount of tax they pay through their own lifestyle choices. Again, it comes down to, and again, it encourages savings. You can decide on you're going to take the trip to Greece, or you're going to take the trip to Disney World, or you're going to take the trip, to see the grandkids. And I'm
going to take the trip to North Carolina to come see.
Yeah, there you go. That's right.
But a lot of people sometimes they don't realize that the 401ks, the tax deferred savings retirement plans that the IRS generously allows people to have, that money has not been taxed yet. So some people say, well, they tax me when I earn it, and then they'll tax me again when I spend it. Well, anything you've got in a 401k or anything similar to it has not been taxed yet. And you'll only pay taxes on that when you withdraw it and spend it. But then again, even if you're spending money that you have already been taxed on, i.e. the Roth IRA or a traditional savings account or anything like that, you are still being taxed when you get it, and you are being taxed when you spend it, again, because of the embedded taxes that exist in the retail prices of everything we buy. And that goes away with the fair tax. Those hidden costs go away, and they are replaced with the fair tax. So that's a concept. I wish if I could just open up people's heads and pour it in, that's the one I would really try to get people to understand the most.
Do you ever get this question? Because a couple of people have asked me recently about, and I think the more questions you get, the more people are starting to think critically about a tax on consumption, specifically the fair tax. Within Social Security, their concern is the Social Security fund going to continue to be funded? How does the FAIRtax revenue generated appropriate a certain amount of money to cover distributions under Social Security?
And now we're deviating a bit from the order of the FAQ there on fairtax.org, but it's an important point that I have heard critics say, well, gee, the FAIRtax gets rid of the FICA deduction from your paycheck. Therefore, it starves Social Security of any of its money, and there's nothing left. No, what happens is that the FAIRtax extends the tax base for both Medicare and Social Security from just the people working for a paycheck and paying that payroll tax to everyone whose spending rises above the poverty level. I guarantee you that Elon Musk and, Bill Gates and Jeff Bezos, these ultra rich guys that make most of their money off their investments, they probably draw very little in the way of salary that they would pay the payroll tax on. They live off investments. They become major contributors to Social Security and Medicare when they're not paying a dime into the system today if they're not taking a salary.
Exactly. And I think that's why I brought that up, because we were talking about Social Security and how that money comes about. So that whole part of understanding about the FAIRtax, I think, is key to the floodgates, because I got my Social Security check. It's coming in. I don't want to lose that. I'm going to be kind of hesitant to look forward to something that would be even better. It's getting over that misunderstanding or not quite getting the point that the various entitlements are still going to be taken care of.
Yeah, and then people who are not paying federal taxes, the underground economy, people who are making their living by less than legal means, people that are not reporting the fair market value of the things they steal that the publication says 17 says they have to do. All of those people become FAIRtax payers and supporters of Social Security and Medicare. And I tell you what, our time has flown away from us today. We're going to continue this theme next week on FAIRtax Power Radio. We have just barely gotten into this FAQ on fairtax.org. Really good. We're going to dig into that a little bit more next week for sure, and I don't know, maybe the following week, just if we feel like it.
Wherever you might happen to be watching or listening to our program, please make a note to in the comments, if you're at Facebook or Rumble, or if you're on YouTube watching the video or listening to us on the radio. How about sending us a question that you've heard somebody ask, a question that you may have, or you've heard somebody ask about the FAIRtax, and we'll make that part of a future program as well.
If you've got friends or family who don't know about the FAIRtax, steer them to this video, share it with them, tell them all about it. But again, that's going to wrap up this edition of FAIRtax Power Radio. Thank you so much for watching and listening. I'm Bob Paxton.
And I'm Bob Scarborough.
We are the FAIRtax Guys, reminding you that the FAIRtax is the only truly fair tax, and once you understand it,
you will demand it.
So tell me, how could I pay less taxes?
Less.
Yeah, I'm trying to get ahead, so how can I pay less?
Well, I suppose you could pay less taxes by earning less money, or you could give to charity.
How is that going to help?
Actually, I'm not supposed to tell you this, but if you know the right people, okay, or if you have a really good lawyer, you can usually get around the big ones.
If I may. Under the FAIRtax, to pay less taxes, you would simply consume less. You would control how much you pay and when you pay your taxes simply by choosing what you purchase and when you purchase something.
So I could stay focused and get ahead.